Hey, welcome to Read with Chide. This is day 8, and I'm excited to be reading my Bible with you today again. For share on your Facebook too if you use Facebook. Um, Today we are reading Genesis chapter 20, 21, and 22. The story has been very interesting in Genesis. These Genesis people are a handful, might I say, especially Lot and his people. Hi, Emmanuel. Thank you for joining me. Let's go right into it. I'll start right away. Genesis chapter 20, verse 1. And Abraham journeyed from thence toward the south country, and dwelled between Kadesh and Shur, and journeyed in Gerar. And Abraham said to his wife Sarah, she Abraham said of his wife Sarah, she is my sister. And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, Behold, thou art but a dead man, for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife. But Abimelech had not come near her. And he said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation? Said he not, said he not unto me, she is my sister? And she herself said, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this. And God said unto him in a dream, Yea, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of thy heart, for I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffered I thee not to touch her. Now therefore restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. And if thou restore her not, know thou that thou shalt surely die, thou and all that are thine. Therefore Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants and told all these things in their ears, and the men were sore afraid. Now, one thing that I always think about when I read this is how the Bible did not hide the frailties of the fathers of faith. The Bible did not make them look like superhumans who never made a mistake. Abraham was afraid, and so he lied. He was scared, and so he lied about something as delicate as this. And it things might have gone awry if God did not intervene. Thank God for God. But yeah, it's always interesting anytime I read this because I remember that even our fathers of faith were not perfect. They made mistakes. Abraham was scared and so he lied. He lied about Sarah being his sister instead of saying she was his wife. And he did this twice. This is the first time here we're reading about. Verse 9. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said unto him, What hast thou done unto us, and what have I offended thee, that thou hast brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin? Thou hast done deeds unto me that ought not to be done. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, What sawest thou that thou hast done this thing? And Abraham said, Because I thought, surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. And yet indeed she is my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. So Sarah was his stepsister, right? In that time, people would marry their sister, they would marry their stepsister, step siblings, they would marry their cousins, to keep it within the family. So, verse 13. And it came to pass when God caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said unto her, This is thy kindness which thou shalt show unto me. At every place whither we shall come, say of me, He is my brother. And Abimelech took sheep and oxen and men servants and women servants and gave them unto Abraham and restored him Sarah his wife. Okay, this is actually the second place. I remember. This is the second place. The first time was with the other king and restored him Sarah his wife. And Abimelech said, Behold, my land is before thee, dwell where it pleaseth thee. And unto Sarah he said, Behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes unto all that are with thee. And with all thus she was reproved. Verse 17. So Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maidservant, and they bare children. For the Lord had fast closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. This is one part that got me wondering, like, the guy didn't even know. You know how they say ignorance is not an excuse before the law. I feel like that's what played out here. Because like it or not, everything you do has consequences. So even though in this instance he didn't know that he was about to do something wrong, the consequence was already waiting for him at the door. But thank God, God intervened, and all of it was averted. Genesis chapter 21, verse 1. Before I go into Genesis chapter 21, another thing that strikes me in this passage is the fact that Sarah was already 90 what? Remember in the previous chapter, when the angel had said that, oh, they will have children, Abraham said, I'm 100, my wife is what, 90, 90 what? How shall we have children now? This was a 90 something year old woman that was entering the eyes of king. Like, her brother even knew already that this my wife is too fine. Anywhere we go, they want to kill me for her sake so that they can take her. So let me just lie that she's my sister. And a king, you need to pay attention to all the factors, not just a random guy who does not have money, so his taste in women is not so high. This is a king that could have any damsel he chooses. A king saw her, and her beauty entered his eyes, and he took her for himself at 90 plus. Genesis chapter 21, verse 1. And the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. For Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as God had commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. And Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. And she said, who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman will not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. And the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. And God said unto Abraham, let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad, because of thy bondwoman. In all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken unto her voice, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called. And also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation. So this is God saying, I know what your wife is asking for is a lot, because the boy in question is your son, right? Like it or not, he's Abraham's son, and it's hard to chase away this woman along with her son, knowing the boy is your child. But you know what? Do what your wife has said. Send him away. I will take care of the boy, right? Verse verse 13 says, and also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is thy seed. Verse 14, and Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a bottle of water and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder and the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered into the wilderness of Beersheba. And the water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under one of the shrubs. And she went and sat down over against him a good way off, as it were a bow shot. For she said, let me not see the death of the child. And she sat over against him and lifted up her voice and wept. So they got to a point, the water had finished, and she thought, this is the death of us, this is how this child will die. And she, sat away from him so she will not see him die. But God had already promised that he would take care of the boy. Verse 17, and God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven, and said unto her, what aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the bottle with water, and gave the lad drink. And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness, and became an archer. And He dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. And it came to pass at that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, spake unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that thou doest. Now therefore swear unto me here by God, that you will not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son, but according to the kindness that I have done unto thee, thou shalt do unto me, and to the land wherein thou hast sojourned. And Abraham said, I will swear. And Abraham reproved Abimelech because of a well of water which Abimelech's servants had violently taken away. And Abimelech said, I wot not who hath done this thing, neither did thou tell me, neither yet heard I of it, but today. And Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them unto Abimelech, and both of them made a covenant. And Abraham set 7 ewe lambs at the flock by themselves. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, what mean these 7 ewe lambs which thou hast set by themselves? And he said, for these 7 ewe lambs shalt thou take of my hand, and they may be a witness unto me that I have digged this well. So he's saying, okay, this previous one, you say you didn't know about it. You didn't hear anything about it until today. Okay, now I am I'm putting this witness between you and I that this well I'm digging now is for me and I have dug it. Verse 31, wherefore he called that place Beersheba, because there they swear both of them. Thus they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech rose up and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, and they returned into the land of the Philistines. And Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned in the Philistines' land many days. Now, this is important because something like this will happen with his son Isaac sometime down the line. Let's continue. Genesis chapter 22, verse 1. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, behold, here I am. And he said, take now thy son, thine only son Isaac. I'm not, like, I know what I'm saying. I'm not making a mistake. Your only son, that one Isaac, take him and get thee into the land of Moriah. No, let me take that again. And he said, take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for the burnt offering, and rose up and went unto the place of which God had told him. Then on the third day Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son, and he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. Quickly, look at verse 5. They were going to sacrifice, and he said, going yonder to worship. So, this is something I want you to note for later, how that he referred to doing burnt offering as worship unto God. Second thing I want to note is, remember when we were reading yesterday where Abraham was interceding with God on Lot's behalf? He was like, God, you're a good God. You are a just judge. You will not kill the righteous along the unrighteous. You will not destroy this city if you found 50 righteous people. For the sake of 50 righteous, you will not destroy them. I remember I mentioned that I want you to pay attention to what Abraham's thought about God was, how Abraham saw God in terms of God's justice and the type of person God is. And let that be in your mind as you read this story of Abraham offering his son Isaac. If Abraham believed that God is a good God, he's a just judge, and he's a righteous judge, and he will not punish the righteous along with the unrighteous, I want you to begin to ask yourself what was going on in Abraham's mind. He was ready to sacrifice Isaac. I'm sure he didn't think of God as a God who wanted human sacrifice. So what was happening? Verse 7, and Isaac spake unto Abraham his father, and said, my father. And he said, "Here am I, my son." And he said, "Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?" And Abraham said, "My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering." So they went, both of them together. This verse 8 is very, very instructive, because I don't know about you, but when we were being taught this thing in Sunday school and in CRS, they did not really picture it this way. They pictured it as if Abraham was convinced that God wanted human sacrifice and he was going to sacrifice Isaac in that way. But the truth is, Abraham was walking in obedience. If you know one thing about Abraham, from before God said about him that, "I know Abraham, he will teach his children." Abraham had been recorded to be obedient. God said, "Leave your father's house, go to a land I will show you." He left. God said, "Count the stars, I will give you children that are more than the stars." He believed God, and God accounted it to him for righteousness. He had shown himself to be obedient. So even though he knew at the back of his mind that God cannot literally want my son, God cannot want human sacrifice, that's not who I know him to be, he was also convinced, "I will obey until the last." When we read on, you will see it. At the worst case, if I sacrifice the boy, God is able to bring him back to life. So let's go. Let's just see. I know my own part is to be obedient to the last. So this verse 8, he says, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went, both of them together. Verse 9, and they came to the place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven, and said, "Abraham, Abraham." And he said, "Here am I." And he said, "Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him, for now I know that thou fearest God, seeing that thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me." And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. With his mouth, Abraham has said, God will provide himself a burnt offering, in verse 8. And in verse 13, God indeed provided himself a lamb for the burnt offering. Verse 14, and Abraham called the name of the place Jehovah Jireh. As it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. Verse 15, and the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time, and said, By myself have I sworn, said the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed, as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gates of his enemies, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned unto his young men, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. Now, this God was reiterating what he had promised him, that your seed will be as the stars of the earth and as the sand of the seashore. And, he was ready to sacrifice it all for the sake of God. Like, even if I kill this boy, I know God is able to bring him back to life. I would let him go. And that's like an explanation we get in the New Testament, right? Because the Old Testament is in the New Testament revealed. God saw his total obedience, total surrender, total obedience. If God said I should do it, I'm going to go ahead and do it. How he will create, or how he will correct the situation, is up to him. He is God. My own part is obedience, and I will do my part. That is a mindset we all need to have. Verse 20, and it came to pass after these things that it was told Abraham, saying, Behold, Milcah, she hath also borne children unto thy brother Nahor. Huz his first son, and Boz his brother, and Kimuel the father of Aram, and Chesed, and Hazor, and Pildash, and Jidlaph, and Bethuel. And Bethuel begat Rebekah. These eight Milcah did bear to Nahor, Abraham's brother, and his concubine, whose name was Rumah. She bare also Teba, and Gaham, and Tahash, and Maacah. And that brings us to the end of our Bible reading for today. May God bless the reading of his word. Please do well to share in the comments here what your thoughts are for the scriptures we just read. We read Genesis 20, 21, and 22. I think it's very interesting the story that we read. Abraham, my pastor says something. He says one of the reasons why you will know the Bible is true and correct is that it did not hide the frailties of the people in the Bible. It did not make them look like superheroes who were superhuman or whatnot. It showed their frailties, seeing that Abraham was scared and as a result he lied and all of that. But that did not stop him from being who God has called him to be. That means even when we make mistakes, we have the confidence that God sees beyond that and sees our hearts. And the story of Isaac also always fascinates me. Abraham's complete obedience in God to God and trust in God. Thank you for joining me this evening. Please do well to join again tomorrow evening as we continue to read the Bible together. This is day 8. Tomorrow will be day 9. Do not miss any day. The consistency is very important also. Have a blessed night. See you tomorrow with all your friends. Good night.